chapter 9, the first 20 verses. Meanwhile, Saul continued to breathe murderous threats against the disciples of Christ. He had gone up to the high priest and asked for letters addressed to the synagogue in Damascus that would authorize him to arrest and take to Jerusalem any followers of the way that he could find, both women and men. As he traveled along and was approaching Damascus, a light from the sky suddenly flashed about him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice saying, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" "Who are you?" Saul asked. The voice answered, "I am Jesus, and you are persecuting me. Get up now and go into the city where you will be told what to do." Those traveling with him were speechless. They heard the voice, but could see no one. Saul got up from the ground, unable to see, even though his eyes were open. They had to take him by the hand and lead him into Damascus. For 3 days he continued to be blind, during which time he ate and drank nothing. There was a disciple in Damascus named Ananias. Christ appeared to him in a vision, saying, "Ananias." Ananias said, "Here I am." Then Christ said to him, "Go at once to Straight Street, and at the house of Judah ask for a certain Saul of Tarsus. He is there praying." Saul had a vision that a man named Ananias will come and lay hands on him so that he would recover his sight. But Ananias protested, "I have heard from many sources about Saul and all the harm he has done to your holy people in Jerusalem. He is here now with authorization from the chief priests to arrest everybody who calls on your name." Christ said to Ananias, "Go anyway. Saul is the instrument I have chosen to bring my name to Gentiles, to rulers, and to the people of Israel. I myself will show him how much he will have to suffer for my name." With that, Ananias left. When he entered the house, he laid his hands on Saul, saying, "Saul, my brother, I have been sent by Jesus Christ, who appeared to you on the way here, and to help you recover your sight and be filled with the Holy Spirit." Immediately, something like scales fell from Saul's eyes, and he regained his sight. He got up and was baptized, and his strength returned after he had eaten some food. Saul stayed with the believers in Damascus for a few days, and soon began proclaiming in the synagogues that Jesus was the only begotten of God. This concludes the reading.
All right, everybody. So my favorite part of worship, it's always these moments where I get to have parental confession time. And so I was thinking about this story and thinking about what it's like to be a parent. And Lauren and I, we have a 3.5-year-old whom we love, Isabel Claire. And we did some research before we became parents. You're going to read up on this whole parenting gig. And there are apparently stages of childhood development, right, that kids go through. And we thought we knew what all those were. We didn't. And there's this stage of childhood development that nobody tells you about that's like 4 months long and counting right now. And it has its own theme song. It has its own clothes and costumes, its own storybooks, its own dinnerware, its own pajamas. This stage of childhood development is called Frozen. Does anybody know what I'm talking? Yes, you do. Okay, if you don't know what Frozen is, God bless you. You've been spared. It's a Disney movie it's actually a great story. But when little kids get a hold of it, like they cannot let it go. Which is, the theme song of this movie is Let It Go. And Lorna and I, we just pray every night, "Lord, let it go. Let it go." So I was thinking about this this week, and I came across this clip. So if you're a parent or a grandparent, and you've walked the journey that Lorna and I are on, you will appreciate this mom. She takes this video with her cell phone. Her daughter has been 3 days out of school doing nothing but singing Let It Go. And this is what happens. So let's see if we can play that in.
Turn away and slam the door. I don't care what they're going to say.
Let it go.
Like a storm ranger, cold never
No school.
It's time to see what I can do. To test the wind and break through. No rules for me. And breathe. Let it go.
Let it go.
Let it go. Turn away and let
This
it
would be
go.
day 3.
I don't care.
School still out.
Going to stay
All day.
like a storm.
Frozen. Elsa. What's the snowman name? Olaf. And what's the sister name that froze everybody up from the beginning? Elsa. What's the other one name? Anna.
Like a storm.
If I ever could choke some cartoon characters, it'll be them.
And Kristoff and
Kristoff, all them. I'd kill them if I could.
please don't kill Elsa.
Right? So if you didn't catch that last part, when she says, I kill him, her daughter goes, don't kill Elsa. And of course, that's what provokes that expression. Now, we can laugh our way through those very heavy words of choking and killing because we know that this is hyperbole, right? It's deliberately exaggerated. It's never meant to be taken literally. These characters are not literal characters. We know Mom is not going to hurt anybody or kill anybody. It's really, really funny. And lots of parents can relate to this thing that has 200,000 hits already. And here's the thing. People literally do hurt each other, though. And people literally do kill other people, right? We think about Sri Lanka. We think about Christchurch. We think about the synagogue in San Diego. 34 mass shootings in the month of April in the United States alone in 2019, according to the U.S. Gun Violence Archive. People do these things. We heard the reading that said Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the followers of Jesus, wants authority to bind and brutalize anyone that he finds on his journey. That's not hyperbole. That's not exaggeration. He wants to hurt people. When we think about Saul, we're going to think about him a little bit as a historic figure today, and he's very important to the church as we know it today. When I think about these characters and these stories that are from so long ago, the epistles are written before the Gospels. These are the earliest stories we have about Christian communities. Here's this guy Saul, and who would Saul be in 2019? Okay? If he was with us in 2019, I don't think it'd be much of an exaggeration to say that Saul's the guy who got up this morning, got his AR-15 assault rifle from his gun locker, filled the bump stock to maximum capacity, and got in his car and wants to drive to the nearest church to hurt and kill as many people as possible. That's who Saul is. And on the way to church, who else but JC shows up in his front seat? Saul doesn't go off the road, stays on the road. And Jesus says to Saul, Saul, throw the gun away, throw the bullets out, go to church. I'll tell you what to do when you get there. Oh, and Saul, before I disappear here, you're going to be my voice for peace and justice and love on every street corner, in every congregation, in front of every protest and every level of government. Peace. And is gone. We forget this is the same guy who's breathing hatred and murder this morning that most of us, many of us, would have read at our weddings. This is the guy who wrote, love is patient, love is kind, love is not arrogant, boastful, or rude. It doesn't insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It doesn't rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things. Love endures everything. It never ends. Same mouth, different words. Same body, very different heart. This transformation is so from the top of his head to the tip of his toes that the book of Acts says Saul has to change his name. This encounter on the road to Damascus, this vision that he has, he goes from being Saul to becoming a new person whose name is Paul. And Paul would take all of that energy, all that passion, and he would channel it into defending the earliest believers of Jesus with his life. And without him and all of the many, many women who are not always really lifted out in his letters, but all of the many women who supported Paul and who were his disciples as well as other men, it's not hyperbole to say without those ancestors of faith, we wouldn't be here today. We would have never heard the name Jesus of Nazareth, let alone Jesus Christ. There would be no church. Paul is so responsible for the spread and the building of what we know as the church today. The retired Anglican Bishop, N.T. Wright, has this beautiful quote about Paul, who's a very interesting character in our history. And N.T. Wright says, as a bishop, he's like, when you read Paul, everywhere Paul goes, there's a riot. Everywhere I go as a bishop, people just want to serve tea, right? And lots of us from modern minds, we hear this story that's got all these supernatural elements. Jesus shows up and they're talking to each other and they're on this road and we kind of go, I'm going to sip my Earl Grey and change the page. Like, what does that really mean anymore? Did that really happen in that way? Or is this just fantasy? Is it just church propaganda to say, like, Jesus is real and Christianity is the right choice. Judaism is bad. People who believe in Jesus are going up. People who don't are going to the bad place. That's not what this story is at all. I think this story should still stop us in our tracks and arrest us to take in what's being talked about here. We don't have to see this as a choice between Judaism and Christianity. Paul is a Jewish man. Jesus is a Jewish man. They're both Jewish people, right? There is no Christianity at this point. That's a Roman word that gets slapped on our ancestors later. Our earliest ancestors call themselves the people of the way. There's no church yet in these stories. It's not a choice between Christianity and Judaism. Paul's a Pharisaic Jew, and Jesus wasn't, but they had a lot in common. So Jewish people lived in an occupied country with the empire on their doorstep, and Rome has its own religion and its own ways, and it's foisting those on the people it conquers. And the Pharisees were the folks who were saying, listen up, everybody. We got to live our faith in public, intentional, and explicit ways. We got to hold on to the tradition of our ancestors and resist this. Jesus said much the same thing. They applied it in very different ways in their ministries. But he has a lot more in common with Pharisees than he does not. So can we hear this story as something other than the God of the sky just kind of fell down next to Paul and they have this interchange? Or is this something else? Can we hear it in a different way? And I really think we can hear this as a wake-up call. And we were talking with the kids. We said a wake-up call is when someone or something stirs us, disturbs us, so that we see we've got a life to live. We have important things to do. We have gifts to share that really make a difference. It's a spiritual awakening that Paul experiences. And this painting right here, Universal Soul, is by our own Natalie Moyes. Natalie, where are you today? If you want to know more about this incredible creation, she made this herself. The picture doesn't do it justice. Universal Soul, when I saw it, I went, right, this is what's happening to Paul. He's seeing again for the first time. Like the horizon is totally opened up with possibility. He will never be able to look at other people and at himself the same way again. It's an evolving journey. That's the journey of a lifetime, forever. Like faith is not a destination. It is that journey. That's the journey of the Spirit. And up to this point, Saul's kind of like slumbering along in his life. Like he's just sort of tarring this whole community with the same brush of hatred and violence. Because none of us have heard that story in the headlines lately. Saul at this point is saying he loves God so much, he will allegedly kill for it. Only one problem with that. That's not about God, and that's not about love. That's about being right. That's a totally different thing. You can't believe in God and be willing to kill people for it. You can't believe in love and be willing to destroy other people for it. It doesn't work that way. This is the guy who wrote 1 Corinthians, which we read earlier. That's what love is. When Paul's asking the letter of Colossians, what is love? He said, love of God, perfectly binds everything together in harmony. You can't have that if you're willing to destroy anyone and everything. That's the opposite of that love, right? It's about something very different. And I would say that he suffers from what we might call self-righteous love. When you've got self-righteous love, you put something or someone at the center of your life, and you can see intentionally how doing that is destroying your own humanity and the humanity of others, and yet you continue to choose it anyway, right? You continue to choose it anyway. That's how Paul can get to a place where he can love God and still kill other people. Anybody who has battled addictions in your life, if you've battled a grief that has tried to consume your life for entire years or entire periods, if you've ever been a workaholic, you know what I'm talking about, right? It's this choice that we put at the center of our lives that takes away our own humanity and intentionally is destroying the humanity of our relationships, and we see it happening, and we keep choosing it anyway. The Bible has a classic word for this. It's called idolatry, right? We put that at the center of our lives, and it takes our life. It doesn't give us life. And this is what's happening to Paul. This is not a choice about religion. Paul has a spiritual encounter with Jesus, right? And it awakens him from this state, this sleepwalker state of just living with hate every day. And it calls him to make a new road by walking a path of peace and joy and hope and love. It's an amazing story. This is not about religion. It's about the heart. The God within, whose name Jeremiah says is written on our heart. It's about revealing in someone's life that this God is really with us right now, right here. Paul is letting that loose, and we're seeing the fruits of that journey. It's amazing. The writer of this story of Acts is supposedly Luke, and Luke could have put this story anywhere at any time, but he puts Paul on a road, an open horizon of possibility. It's a journey and not a destination at all that Luke is interested in. Life in faith is this constantly expanding and evolving horizon. That's the joy of it. When God is the agent of change in our lives, anything is possible. I'm willing to bet if I ask, who saw Jesus Christ in their front seat on the way coming to church today, how many hands would go up? Yet, I would still say all of you experienced a spiritual awakening and a wake-up call. Might not be just like Saul, but you wouldn't be here otherwise. You wouldn't be so passionate about our mission at Bedford United Church. You wouldn't be giving your time and your talents and your treasure the way that you do week in and week out. You would not. You could all be somewhere else, and yet you are here because it matters. Because you know it's part of your answering that call of the Spirit. When God is the agent of change, anything is possible in our lives. Even a white supremacist reconciling with a Sikh man whose father this white supremacist helped murder. Even that. Has anybody ever heard the story of Pardeep Singh Kalika and Arnold McCallis? Yeah. The National covered this story in such a beautiful way, and it's so powerful. Look it up. I'll send the link around later on this week. So here's this story about Pardeep's dad, who is the president of the Sikh temple in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Yes. And they're in worship. A white supremacist comes in with a loaded weapon, kills 6 people, including Pardeep's dad. His dad throws himself in front of the congregants and takes 5 bullets. Like, that's the kind of guy he was. And after this incredible tragedy, Pardeep, the son, is going like, what do I do? And so he does what he thinks his dad would do. So he goes out and he dedicates his time to comforting the people who are broken and who are full of grief and who have lost so much. He makes sure the funeral happens well for all of the victims. And they begin to rebuild and to keep going as a temple. And as they're cleaning up all of the mess, all the violence, congregants are saying to Pardeep, there are bullet holes in the wall of our temple. Like, we need to fix these. And Pardeep says, you will not fix the bullet holes. They stay. Because their message is that hate and violence will never carry the day. Our love and hope will get through and beyond all of this. And they put little plaques under the bullet holes that say, we are one. The first words in Sikh scriptures. We are one. They're not Christians, and yet I would say the risen one appeared as clearly there as anywhere, as to Paul on the road. The cantata sings and the stories sing of the risen one appearing with wounds, still intact. But they're not signs of violence anymore. They're signs of love and life that have moved beyond it. That's exactly what those bullet holes are. To me, that is an Easter story par excellence of how this continues to happen in our life, in our world today. So Pardeep kind of has a bit of a spiritual awakening, and he doesn't go after anger and hate and want to hurt people. Instead, he says, I know I can't do that, but I need to understand how. Like, what motivates another person to do this to other people? So he reaches out to someone who's known as Arno McCallis. Arno, at 16 years of age, is in a white power band. He is full of hate, helps to start a skinhead movement in Milwaukee. So what Arno would say about himself is, in those days, if you were white and you met him on the street, if you were white, not a different race, not gay, not a visible minority, if you were white, he would immediately try to convert you to his ideology. And if you didn't agree with him, if you resisted him, he'd beat you. Senseless. He said he radiated hatred and violence. He just radiated it. And even at that part of his life, he could tell that all the people around him were either getting arrested or were dying. And he knew that if he continued on this journey, it was going to end one way: homicide and suicide. He would be one of those mass shooters. There's no other way for it. And his spiritual awakening happened at a really key moment. His group was building up guns for an impending race war they imagined was coming. They were getting ready for, the apocalypse kind of deal. And his daughter's born. And his daughter changes his life because he says, if I keep going down this road, I know where this road goes, I will never see her grow up, and she will never know me as except this person who is filled with hatred and violence and rage. So step by step, Arno sort of moves out of that life, gets a job, makes new relationships, seeks help and counseling, moves out of that life. And he's known in the community that he once belonged to this movement. So Pardeep calls him, and the first thing Arno says to him is, when I heard the news about the shooting in the temple, I was up all night long because his greatest fear was he recruited the shooter who killed Pardeep's dad. And he did. And he did. And despite that, very biblical, these two guys meet at a coffee shop on the side of the road. And they sit down to have coffee together, and they talk about how much their dads are alike, how much their daughters are alike, how much they share as human beings. Eventually, Pardeep asks Arno, why do people do this? Like, why would you have done this? And he said, it's easy, Arno says. Hurt people are always going to want to hurt other people. It's as simple as that. These two decide that they are not going to let that be the final word, that they're going to dedicate their lives to overcoming hatred and violence with love and peace and friendship. Because if those two can reconcile all of that, then other people can too, and it's never been needed more than it is today. So they start their own nonprofit. They travel the world doing this work, telling these stories, encouraging people to think about how they can share that light of peace right now in their lives, in their churches, in their schools and communities, and how to do that. And their determination is to say, we cannot let violence and hatred be the last word. We need, in my words, to move from Saul to Paul. We all got to do that. And that's not about religion. That's about our humanity. That's about the spirit that is within us all and in everything. You might be saying this morning, Matt, that's an awesome story. I would never do that. That's so beyond where I am. On May 21st, much of Jakar's immediate family is coming to Canada. And people like Richard Rhodes and all the volunteers that belong to the Syrian refugee program here at Bedford United Church and the coalition that we built around that, when everything went down in Syria, those people stopped in their tracks and they said, this is a call for me. I'm going to give my time and my talents and my treasure, and I'm going to work for years, and I'm going to help to try and bring peace into somebody's life. And they get to celebrate that in a new way all over again on May 21st. It's incredible. Our past, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Our pastoral care team, Katie and I were like, we've been like overwhelmed. Like there's been so many funerals lately and so much grief and so many people having difficult struggles and struggles with chronic illnesses. And our pastoral care team came to Katie and was like, look, we know we got to do more. We heard the call. Let's get to it. And without them, I don't know what we would do. They've been doing incredible ministry as the hands and feet of Christ in the world. Rick's cantata, when you think about all the people who participated in Awaken Us, the 60-something singers, the band, Rick, all the work and the hours and the practice and the energy, they all had to choose to stop in their tracks and say, that's my call. I'm going to answer it. And all of us were woken up in a radically new way in hearing that story. When we think about the Road to Damascus experience and we say, no, that didn't happen. It's just a fantasy. Keep drinking your tea and flip the page. No. This story continues to happen because it's the work of Easter. It's happening in everyone's life. It's happening here in Bedford United Church all the time because God is here all the time. And all the people said, Amen.
Into Thank you. It's beautiful. Now it's time for our offering to be collected. If you're new here and you notice people doing something like this over the plate, it's because they've already contributed by way of par. Do we have the red wagon coming up? It is coming.
I've heard it's going to make you good.
Okay, great. Thank you all for your generosity in goods, in money, and in service to this church, to this community, and to the world. We need a zoom kind of wheel wagon. Do something about that, Brian. How many were here last week for the cantata, either on Saturday night or Sunday? It was spectacular. The title of the cantata was Awaken Us, and which really fit in well with the theme of today's service. So I wrote a prayer to kind of bring them both together. Let us pray. Awaken us, loving God. Awaken us to the large and small ways that awaken us to the large and small joys that fill our daily lives, but we are often too busy to feel. Awaken us to the beauty of music, of color, of nature, and of each other that we often fail to see and hear. Awaken us to our sacred connection with you that fills us with wonder and oneness. Awaken us to our responsibilities to the earth, to all forms of life, and to people all over the world. Awaken us to our personal strengths, talents, and passion, and help us to develop them in ways that give us meaning and enrich the lives of others. Awaken us to the importance of community in our hearts, especially the feeling of belonging that comes from our family, our friends, and from our church. Awaken us to the glow of self-love, which creates confidence and inner peace. Awaken us to the transformation that love in all its expressions can bring, making us happy and grateful for this precious gift of life you have given us. We pray in the Spirit of Jesus, the great awakener. So we have one more song, right? We are pilgrims.
We are pilgrims on a
Please be seated, and I'd like to invite Daryl forward. He's got a presentation for us. A short presentation, right, Daryl? I know Daryl.
Those of you that were at the AGM, I made a comment that when we did the renovation out there a few years ago, I ran across the church term for lobby or foyer called narthex. And we started calling it narthex, narthex, narthex. People would book the narthex, and then in one quick service, Buddy here brings a little bit of Newfoundland to us, and it's called the porch. So, the porch. Can you believe that? So, with that, I relinquished the term narthex, and if you would step forward, Matt. This is a gift from Nancy and I. It's a drywall kit for Katie and
Yeah. You sure? You want me to open this now?
You want to open this? Yeah, I do.
Yes, you do. Yeah. You want me to open this? You open your mouth one time at Bedford United Church. One time, they say.
So Brian Skelly has drilled a couple holes in the pillar out there, so it's all ready to be hung when we finish the service. So thanks for the new terms. Your Newfoundland's arrived.
Thank you for the sense of humor that pervades this place. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you to everyone who made this service possible, the tech team, the fabulous choir. Barry, I'm going to miss you on that piano, buddy. Yeah. After the service, don't zoom out of here. This is the opportunity for you to talk to each other. We're having the little welcoming circle right outside the door. So Gloria and Len on the porch right after the service. Blue chairs, make it happen. I'm going to read just part of a poem called Awakening Now by Dana Folds. She's my favorite poet. Why wait for your awakening? The moment your eyes are open, seize the day. Now is the only time for you that you have to be whole. Now is the sole moment that exists to live in the light of your true self. Perfection is not a prerequisite for anything but pain, right? Right, Gloria? Please, oh please, don't continue to believe in your disbelief. This is the day of your awakening. Behold,